she said, I'm Lisa, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I was born in a little small town in Northern California. My dad is a pastor, so I grew up in a church home with a good family. We had our messes. We have our problems like everybody else does. Yeah. But it was a good family. My dad was busy a lot with church. As I said, I was the youngest of 5, so kind of by the 5th one, gotta do whatever you want. So they like to say it's because I was the baby of the family that I got away with murder, but really, by the 5th one, my mom was tired. She was like, do whatever you want. So, plus, during that time, between the time, I think it was about the time I was 11 months old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer for the first time. So things got a little crazy for our whole family from that point forward. As growing up, about a couple years later, I think I was about 5 or 6, we lived in a neighborhood with lots of kids. We would be outside playing all the time. Summer rules, you got to stay outside till the lights went out, or till the lights came on, excuse me. When the lights came on, you better be home or you were done. And there was one summer night, I remember I was standing out in front with a bunch of the girls from the neighborhood. For some reason, I was in my long yellow nightgown. That's cool. No clue why. Why I was outside of my nightgown, but I was. And we were standing in a circle, and I remember we started talking about stuff, and somehow, as little girls do, conversations are all over the place. The conversation turned to flowers and gifts of some kind. And I got all excited. And I was like, I know where you guys can get the most amazing flowers. They are beautiful. And I mean, I was 5, 6. I didn't really know what, the most beautiful flowers looked like. I just knew the ones I had seen were gorgeous. And I gave them as a gift from my mom. But they were wildflowers. They were just little nothings that grew on the side of the road, little wildflowers. So as I started to tell them where they could find them, I said to them, I said, but you just have to promise me one thing. You can't tell anybody how to get them because it's a secret. No one can know. And you have to do a favor for someone else. And they all kind of looked at me weird. And I said, you have to ask, I'll say his name is Bobby. You have to ask Bobby. He was the neighborhood bully. And everybody instantly was like, what are you talking about? I said, well, Bobby knows where the best flowers are. But you have to do a favor for him first. And they were kind of like, what are you talking about? And as I described what you had to do, I started telling them, and then the look of shock came across their face. Because what you had to do was allow him to basically molest you and perform oral sex. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know how to describe it other than just what happened. And the shocked looks on their faces grew bigger. And instantly, one of the little girls in the neighborhood, she's like, I have to tell my dad. I have to tell my dad. And I was like, no, you can't tell your dad. You can't tell her. You can't tell him anything. Her dad was the sheriff. And I was like, you can't say anything. And she's like, no, I have to. Thank God. Thank God she did. Because that was it wasn't a secret anymore. It was told. The secret was out. The psychologist came. I had to point to pictures. I had to say what touched what. And I had to be really specific. And I knew that what had happened was not okay, but I didn't know what it would do to me later.
I think there's so many things I want to say, but I think there was just a moment for you. We're going to tell the whole story and then go back. How about that? Tell them about the moment for you when you realized that, I gotta deal with this. I gotta get freedom from this.
Yeah. So I would say, like I said, I was like 5, 6 years old. I wasn't very old. It had happened multiple times, but I didn't, once it came out, he moved away. I don't know what happened to him. And in our family, we didn't talk about it anymore. It just kind of got, I thought for years, it got swept under the carpet and it wasn't talked about. It was something that you just don't talk about. You don't say it to anybody, not even my sisters. There's 4 girls in my family of the 5, 4 of us are girls. I wasn't allowed to say anything to the sister that I shared a bedroom with. Like, couldn't tell anybody. And it kind of went away, but never fully and never completely. As I kind of came into my teenage years, I was one of the first girls in my class to develop, to get a period, all that gross stuff. Like, I was one of the first ones. And because of that, I got teased a lot by the boys. I got nicknames about my chest. I got called that every single day. I had boys that would sit behind me in class and taunt me the entire time. Now they would say it was bullying. At that time, they would just taunt me. And it was always about my body, always about the way I looked. And I didn't know any other way to get attention than to dress the part. And so even though like we had modesty rules in my family, we weren't allowed to wear 2 pieces, all that stuff, I did everything possible to show parts of my body that would get me attention. And it did. I dated guys who were physical with me, beyond what I was comfortable with, but I was too scared to say no. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't feel worthy. I felt dirty. I felt tainted, even though I was so little and I didn't choose it. I felt like my purity was gone. I felt like everything pure and innocent about me was done, and that I wasn't valuable or worth more than what these guys were saying to me, and the cat calls, and boys sitting behind me undoing my bra in class, like that kind of stuff. I didn't feel like there was anything else for me other than to accept attention that way. But I loved God, but I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel enough for Him. And I always felt lacking. But as you get older, and those feelings get deeper, and the wounds grow, and they fester, and they just, almost like a bad wound that just won't go away. I was dating the man of my dreams at that point. My husband and I started dating in high school. He is a great man, but I still just felt unworthy. And because of the fact that I felt like my innocence was lost. Even us, like, we weren't even careful about boundaries and pushing past, even though I would go and promise at camps and things that I would, stay pure and all that stuff, I pushed those boundaries every opportunity I had, all the time. And it didn't do anything to make me feel better. It might have felt better for a minute, but afterwards I just felt worse and worse and worse about myself. And then as I got older, we were married. We dated for about 5 years, and got married. We moved to Arizona to live closer to some of my family. And I was in a church with Eddie and Autumn, and I was doing these Bible studies. And there was a couple Bible studies that I did. One of them was on Esther. And I remember specifically the part where we got to Esther going before the king. She was the queen. But at that time, she wasn't allowed to go before the king without his permission. But in order to save her people, she had to go before the king and ask him to save them. And there was a specific verse that says, where she tells her uncle, and she says, "If I perish, I perish. If I die, I die," basically. And it just stuck out to me. And then I did another Bible study, and it was on the life of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, there's a story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they're about to be sent into the fiery furnace for not being willing to bow down to the king. And again, there was this part where they are about to be thrown into their death, into this extremely hot fire. And there's this part where it says, they say, if God is able to save us, he will. But even if he doesn't. And I was like, wait, if I perish, I perish. And if God can, he will. But if he can't, he's still God. And there was a couple things around that same time that just solidified and confirmed that same message. And I just kept hearing that, like, even if I die, I die. Even if I'm messed up, he's still God. He's still good. He still loves me. And I don't need to live my life with shame and guilt and the fear and all those things that I was holding on to and dwelling in. And I felt depressed. My husband hated going to church with me on certain days of the year because I was taking things in my life, health issues and infertility issues that I was struggling with at that time. And I was saying that was a punishment for me. I thought my infertility was a punishment because of the way that I lived my life as a teenager. I thought God didn't want to bless me with kids, which was the one thing in the world I wanted the most. I wanted a family. I had since I was little. And I can remember Chad and I talking about our worst fears at one point, way before we knew we had infertility issues. And he's like, what's your worst fear? And I said, that you and I will never be able to have kids. I mean, I was weird to the point where, like, I wanted grandkids. Like, I was already thinking past my kids to grandkids. And I was like, I'm afraid that we won't be able to have kids. And he's like, no. God knows your desires. That's not going to happen. We've been married for 12 years, almost 13. And we still don't have any kids. But even still, God is good, and he loves me. He doesn't want me to feel tainted and dirty and used. I felt disposable. I felt like I wasn't worthy of anything. But he found me worthy. And he redeemed my life. He did it when I was younger, but I accepted it and understood it fully as I got into that time when I was reading all of that stuff. I just knew, even if, and I'll tell you, like, for years, I would never make the statement that, I would say that even if, but I could never say the words, even if God never gives us a family, even if God never gives me kids. I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it out loud. I was afraid to even think it. But I came to a point where I realized God was good and he was giving me family. I was getting to be a mom to our nieces and nephews. I was getting to be a mom to other young women. As my husband and I started serving with Blush, we have college interns that we get to love and pour into. And God gives me opportunities to be a mom all the time because he's good and he cares about us and he doesn't want to see us feel, he's angry at what happened to me when I was little. He's not angry at me. He doesn't look at me as dirty. He looks at me as precious and valuable and worthy. He looks at me as those things. And I don't have to live like my life doesn't matter and that I'm not of any worth anymore. I have freedom over those things.
I know that this resonates with people. This is one of those things, sexual abuse, especially when girls and little boys are younger. And it's this secret, I've heard lots of stories, even people telling their parents, their parents say, don't tell anyone, or they kind of, like you were saying, it wasn't intentionally swept under the rug, but it just happened.
Yeah, I found that out later. In fact, because of Blush, we get to do blogs, and I decided I kind of had come to that point where I wasn't ashamed of it anymore. It wasn't something that I chose for myself, but it was part of who I am. It's part of what built me into the person that I am today. And I went back and before the blog posted, I called my mom and I said, And I just said, Mom, I need to tell you, there's going to be something that comes out through the blog, and I want to make sure that I tell you before it comes out so that you're not surprised by it. And as I shared with her what was going to be in there was just kind of silence. And I was really taken back by it, because I thought for years it had been swept under the rug. And in reality, as I talked to her, and as she had to go talk to my dad, and they talked it through, they thought it was two kids playing doctor. They had no clue that it was the seriousness and the level it was. And as I've talked to them about this over the last couple of years, again, there's guilt and shame that's in their life for not hearing me better as a kid. They felt bad. And being able to say, Mom, I'm okay. He's given me freedom over those feelings. I'm not hurt by those things anymore.
That freedom, though, over this is, I mean, I know from my past, thinking you're unworthy, and that having sexual abuse as a child, that's kind of the foundation for, not to be graphic, but your sexual life.
Absolutely.
And things that should be good in marriage, should be wonderful in marriage, look kind of funky and kind of weird, and they don't feel or seem the way that they should. What would you say to someone that I know is in the audience, because this happens all the time everywhere? What advice would you give to someone that has this in their past, and they still have these feelings of just guilt, shame, anxiety? I know that comes from it, thinking that God is punishing them. And they've kind of maybe even, I mean, obviously there's no kid, there's one little baby in here that I want, but there's no kids in here. I mean, obviously, lives have been built around some of those lies. So what advice would you tell them that helped you find your freedom?
For me, it was the repeated message, hearing it over and over again, reminding myself over and over again of who God was, His character. Because for years, I had been buying into the lies that the enemy wants you to hear, that you aren't worthy, that you're not valuable, that you're tarnished, that you aren't worth more than the way that you're being treated in that moment. And I had to continue. I felt like God was really beating it into me in the sense that it just kept coming back and coming back and coming back about His character and the goodness in His character and the way that God used my experience to be able to talk to other women. I would say, don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid to talk about it. I don't usually talk about it. Obviously, as Autumn said, I've never talked from a stage before. But I've talked one-on-one. I've talked with our friends. I've talked with our family. It's an awkward conversation, I'll tell you. But there is something so freeing about it not being a secret. Not having to hold it in. Not having to hide it. About being able to say, this is a part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. It's not my ending point. I have so much more. There's so much more out there. God is so much bigger. There's so much hope in how much He has in store for me. And I'm so excited He has that much in store for you too. In different ways. But God is big enough to take care of each one of you. There was also a part of my healing that I'm not a reader at all. It's a struggle. I kind of started reading or listening to books on tape in the car, CD, or on my phone, or whatever, because I want to read, but I am not a reader. But I will tell you, there was a book that I read after I thought I was all better. I thought I was fine. It was called Rid of My Disgrace, and if I can, I'd like to share just a little part of what was in there. Okay. Because there's this really pretty part that I don't know, it was really important for me. So it says, what happened to you is not your fault. You are not to blame. You did not deserve it. You did not ask for this. You should not be silenced. You are not worthless. You do not have to pretend like nothing happened. Nobody had the right to violate you. You are not responsible for what happened to you. You are not damaged goods. You are supposed to be treated with dignity and respect. You were the victim of assault and it was wrong. You were sinned against. Despite all the pain, healing can happen and there is hope. And when I read that, I just thought, like, how beautiful is that? How beautiful that God's desire is for us is that no matter what happens, no matter the ugliness of what we're living in today, no matter the ugliness of what happened to us when we were 5, no matter what, even still, God is still God, and He wants us to be treated with dignity and respect. He wants us to be valuable, or feel valuable and loved, and that He is broken over what happened to us. And He is. I know so many people that when things have happened to them, they get so stuck on them. Why would God allow that to happen to me? And yet, He has righteous anger against those things. And He will deal with them. And I have to let Him. Because if I hold on to it any longer, if I had held on to it any longer, it would have eaten me alive.
Isn't that awesome? You guys give